Just me and the monster inside my head. They try to give me chemicals. Come give me a reason to leave my bed, 'cause I've been feeling pretty low. Just me and the monster inside my head. They try to give me chemicals. Come give me a reason to leave my bed. Drag me out of my mood. Give me something to do. Pick me up for the party. All my friends are there too. I've been feeling pretty low. Come give me a reason to leave my bed. I've been feeling pretty low. Pretty low. Pretty low. I've been feeling pretty low. Just me and the monster inside my head. I've been feeling pretty low. Pretty low. Pretty low. Baby, I've been going crazy, everything is suffocating, nobody can figure it out. Not even my therapist wants to fucking deal with this, getting kinda used to the ground. I tried to be alone, but it's getting dark in here. Oh God, I hate this here, thoughts out of control. I'm bouncing off the walls, I wish that you would call. 'Cause I've been feeling pretty low. Just me and the monster inside my head. They try to give me chemicals. Come give me a reason to leave my bed, 'cause I've been feeling pretty low. Just me and the monster inside my head. They try to give me chemicals. Come give me a reason to leave my bed. Drag me out of my mood. Give me something to do. Pick me up for the party. All my friends are there too. I've been feeling pretty low. Come give me a reason to leave my bed. I've been feeling pretty low. Pretty low. Pretty low. I've been feeling pretty low. Just me and the monster inside my head. I've been feeling pretty low. Pretty low. Pretty low. I've been feeling pretty low. Just me and the monster inside my head.
I like a tall woman with a nice big... Just saying. Like Grammy winner Megan Thee Stallion.
Ay, can't touch me like Gojo. Look good at all my photos. Just landed in Kyoto. I'm worldwide, these local. Arigato. Arigato. Can't touch me like Gojo. Look good at ay, can't touch me like Gojo. Look good at all my photos. Just landed in Kyoto. I'm worldwide, these local. Arigato. Arigato. Can't touch me like Gojo. Look good at all my ay, white wig on, I'm finna go Gojo. Type about making you know I'm the proto. I get the trending off every new photo. Want this horse on his chest like a polo. Bow down when I pop out like Sukuna. Eat me's rap, that give me booted up. Pushing my flow, it feel like it's two of us. If a Latina, that's a cooler girl. Sexy jutsu, I feel like Naruto. Think they better than me, I'm like nah. Fighting demons in my head like I'm Itadori. Born what I make and wouldn't have a story. Cowboy hat with a chap, real hot girl, put it on the map. Everybody knows Tina Snow is the Meg. All of these be feeling attached. I'm not gonna argue with Sasuke Abby. It's so mad I'm a weeb and a baddie. Y'all be my biggest haters, knowing if we met your foe like pepper. Can't touch me like Gojo. Look good at all my photos. Just landed in Kyoto. I'm more
Little anime-inspired soundtrack there. Wonder why I played that one. GM, everybody. Welcome back to another banger show with Pixelmon. Pixelmon is a gaming native monster collecting IP published by Mon Protocol, powered by Mon Token. We have Stuart with us today, CMO of Mon Protocol, Pixelmon, Liquid Studio, X Riot Games. We have ME, also known as me, but I'm not introducing myself, I'm introducing me, Seraph, A43 Ventures, building Seraph Global. We also have Game GPT by Prism today, AI-driven game engine, absolutely incredible speaker. I've shared this space with him, like, honestly, more times. I've spent more time with you, Game GPT, than I have with my own missus at this point. So you got some explaining to do. We also have Kamon with us today, building Web3's first true cross-platform MMORPG, World of Kaguya Train. Cannot wait to really dive into this one. And today we're talking all about gaming as an art form, the beauty of interactive storytelling. I think it's honestly one of the hottest topics that you can touch on in the gaming space at this point. Like, is it an art form? Does it matter to games that, you know, we treat this as a storytelling thing as well as an interactive thing? It's something that I've heard a lot of discussion on recently. I cannot wait to dive into it with the guest speakers today. Before we do, though, I want the likes, I want the retweets, people. We've got some experts in the room. It's going to be a banger show. So let's get as many people in here as humanly possible to hear this show. Really, really excited for this one. Stuart, are you excited? I can't wait to get into this.
Yeah, 100%, man. I've been kind of talking over the last couple of spaces about the notion of storytelling as opposed to just gaming. And so I'm glad you guys finally put something together that allows us to talk about it.
I love it, Stuart. And yeah, I say we just dive straight in. So Mike, back over to you, homie, on this, which is like, if you just heard the word storytelling in gaming, just like that sentence alone, what's the first thing that hits your mind's eye? Like, literally, what's the first thing that comes to your brain when you hear about storytelling in the concept of gaming?
Well, this is probably going to come up a few times because it's sort of like my heritage. But I just kind of automatically go to stuff like Final Fantasy VII, maybe showing my age a little bit there. I think these sort of RPG platforms are a little bit better for telling the stories as opposed to something like an Auto Battler or, you know, like some sort of chess game, etc. Right? So I kind of gravitate towards my original experiences with gaming, where I was able to immerse myself in like this completely new world, but I'm not just sitting there like in a theater and watching something. I actually get to like be this character, do the adventure, and dive deeper into their story without much of the background of the story. So I'm essentially learning about it as I go. So that's where my mind kind of goes to.
I love that take. And honestly, yeah, like my brain is now like just going through almost, you know, when you hear about like someone like just before they're about to die, like their whole life flashes before their eyes. Right now, all the games I've played through my life are flashing before my eyes. I don't know why I went so morbid with that take, but like genuinely just got like this cycle of incredible games that really have like led me to this point. And I can't actually believe that I'm on stage right now with you, with these speakers, talking about the next iteration of those things where they're going to actually have that impact on somebody else, maybe even me as well. Maybe this is going to come into my mind in future. Game GPT, I want the same question to you without thinking about it too hard. If you hear storytelling and you hear gaming in the same sentence, what's the first sort of thing that hits your mind's eye?
Yeah, and we can get deep into this, but I want this to be kind of a short response as we open up. What's going on, guys? It's Devin from Game GPT. Really happy to be here, and thanks for the invitation. But just to get into it, when I hear gaming and when I hear storytelling, I just think, and I know it's kind of beside the point, but I think lore, right? As games have developed, as technology has made games better, I think the ability to storytell as we go from like Pong in the 60s and 70s all the way to like VR and like Baldur's Gate and Elden Ring and all of these story-rich games are completely changing. So the ability to tell stories, how much information you can give people, and how much of a universe you can get people to play in has completely changed. And I'm sure in this conversation we're going to be talking all about that today, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, I am like chomping at the bit to get involved with all the games that I think of. But we've brought this panel together because you guys are the builders, you're the experts. So I'm going to hold my tongue for now. We'll see how long that lasts. But me, I'm going to throw it over to you, which isn't me. It's Saraf. Me. What's your take on this one?
Yeah. So before I answer that, I always look forward to the music that you're playing, Jack, and also when you're trying to introduce me. I think it's one of the entertainments that we have when we're doing spaces with you, Jack. So yeah, for us here in Seraph, what we see with the storytelling is it's like a fictional immersion. Storytelling with games, producing a game that would take some attention to your game is just one thing, but having this storytelling, having people be immersed to what you're building, not just with the game mechanics and so forth. I think storytelling is one of the art form that people have used, that we can use to convey messages with what we're building. And that is why we also have focused with not only the main storyline of what we are trying to build here in Seraph, but also what you can experience or have be immersed in when you're doing side quests, for you not to be only to be immersed with the game that you're playing, but also why you're playing the game. I think that's also one of the important things. It's not why you're playing the game. Maybe it's going to be the graphics, maybe it's going to be like this, like that, but it should also be with something that what you're trying to convey to your players on why they should play the game and why they should be immersed to what you're building. It's similar to readers reading a book. We need players to be able to also be immersed, similar to readers reading a book. They need to be immersed to the game that they're playing.
I definitely agree with this. I'm not sure everyone does though. So look, guys, if you are listening in the audience, hit us up in the comments whether you care about story when it comes to gaming. And I really am interested to see like what sort of, what the vision of an audience we have in here. Because I've heard some really polarizing takes to this conversation. Came on, I'm going to bring you in on this same question. Actually, I just love hearing like broadly, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the storytelling and gaming in the same sentence?
Well, first of all, again, thank you very much for having us. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, Jack. I will connect with first of all with Stuart said. Of course, it really depends on the kind of game you're talking about. In my perspective, as a old-fashioned gamer and a hardcore gamer, I could say, for me, storytelling and gaming are two things that go really well connected together. Again, it really depends on the game. Of course, like a Pong game doesn't need the storytelling, but if you expand and you want to really create a sort of such as a hit and a game that has a long lasting legacy, then you need to offer storytelling, because that is what, in my perspective, makes the difference between a good game and a great game. I have a lot of example of games where probably the mechanics of the gameplay and everything wasn't that good as other competitors, but they have such as a good storytelling and narrative element into it, then they become a hit because people get passionate about those stories. You get really into those stories. You get connected with those characters. I still remember I cried at the end of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag when at the end scene, not spoiler because it's a kind of a very whole game, but I cried when I saw the last scene because I saw, they were telling again, the wrapping up the story of all those characters that you had the chance to meet, to know them, to understand their values and everything. So I think indeed storytelling, especially for not casual games, but for mid-core and hardcore games, is really makes a difference from a good game to a great game.
I've got goosebumps, dude. Like Enzo was that was honestly like Assassin's Creed, like from the OG days. One of the best story-driven campaigns. And I think at the time I didn't even acknowledge how good that was, because I would press every button that I could to skip some of those, some of those like visual, like some of the video only scenes. But oh my god, yeah, that I think Halo 3 in terms of the campaign, Gears of War, and actually, I don't know if this happened across like the globe, but the first Gears of War, I think the story and how they wrapped that up into the game was still to this day one of the best. But also the trailer, like I can't remember what song it was, but it's like a really, really important song in the UK, and it just immediately wraps you into that like post-apocalyptic like world that it's wrapped up in. There's games, Red Dead Redemption. I could literally give you a list of 100 right now, I swear. But like these are the games that like through my life, like as I was getting more and more into gaming, they kept pushing the boundaries of where gaming ends and like real entertainment in terms of storytelling begins, to the point where now I probably would have a fairly hot take on this, and somewhere I'd like to direct the conversation with you, legends, is do we get to a point where games and film just continue and continue to blur those lines? Because I think they do. I think we will get video games at a certain point that people play as if they're watching a film. Like, it's that immersive. It wraps you up that heavily into the storyline, but also the execution is at that level as well. Like, it's literally like the acting, the characters, the storyline itself will be comparable, that I would not be surprised, and this is a super hot take, that we do see in my lifetime at the very least, a movie game hybrid that hits the Oscars, hits like, you know, these really high echelon sort of areas of film, and people have to eventually just accept that gaming is too close now, that it's a part of it. So Stuart, I'll throw the mic back over to you on this. Am I just out to lunch on this take, or like how does that take make you feel in terms of, do you think that's something that could happen? Do you think it will happen in our lifetimes? Like really seeing these games that almost, you know, really like implore the same reaction that a movie or television series would?
Yeah, if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's like games that are becoming films and or becoming TV series. I mean, it's kind of a two-way street. Sometimes you've got the other thing that comes first, and then it becomes a game. But I think definitely in our lifetime, maybe not even that far away, we're going to see what you're talking about. I think we've kind of already seen it when it comes to just TV series like Arcane. League of Legends is, I believe it's already won, at least been nominated for a bunch of different awards. It's won some Emmys, etc. Right? So I think what you're talking about has already happened, and I think there's a lot of game companies out there that are sort of expanding their purview and becoming more and more like entertainment type companies, and leading into other avenues to build the stories out aside from the game. Because I think at the end of the day, it is all about lore. But at some point in time, the lore within the game can kind of come to an end, or it needs a lot more associative building. Essentially, what we were talking about a little bit in our chat on Slack, which is like the transmedia aspect of storytelling, right? It really just supplements the game and or game sequels if you have this other alternative form of entertainment to tell either the core story that you can build more depth behind it, or tell a derivative story that enhances the core story.
That's interesting to me. And like, to clarify, I believe something along the lines of, you know, when Game of Thrones really hit, and it was just, you could not avoid that conversation. Breaking Bad, I think, in a similar light, and, you know, Attack on Titan for anime. Like, there was just nobody who wasn't watching that within the avenue of like enjoying drama, fantasy, anime, whatever that might be. I think honestly we will see that within a game, because what we're seeing right now is, I read a stat the other day that over basically 3 billion people, nearly half of the planet at this point, are gaming as like one of their major hobbies. Like, and I think when you see that sort of take up, I would imagine that at some point a game will come along where it's not adapted for television. It's literally the game itself, and the story within that game gets comparatively, you know, it gets compared to a Game of Thrones, to a Breaking Bad, in that sense, just as much as the game and the quality get compared. I think it's coming. Maybe you're right. Maybe it has already came. But I definitely think that's something that's going to expand, and something that I'm really excited to see how AI will take part in that, how, you know, the broader sense of gaming really does evolve with that interactive storytelling, and how important that does become as, you know, the other areas of gaming do find, I don't know, hacks, or, you know, just you know, a bunch of different utilities, a bunch of different tools that are making the development process slightly simpler, from an AI angle, from a Unity angle, from an Unreal Engine angle. Like, this sort of stuff really gets my brain churning. I'll open this up to the stage though, and I would really love a hot take on where storytelling and where gaming as in gameplay, sit in your opinions? Like, how important is one against the other? Can you even separate them? And I'll give you a specific example that I heard on another show, which actually I was quite interested in. I was told that in multiplayer gaming, story simply doesn't matter. And the specific reason that was given is when you look at these battle royale games, Call of Duty, Fortnite, like, what story is genuinely wrapped up within these games, and how important is story for the people who are playing it? So that's very much online gaming. I think single playing gaming, this is a very different story, but I'd like a take from some of our speakers over, like, how important do you believe storytelling is in comparison to like the actual gameplay, the mechanics, and realistically, the engagement of the game in that sense. So I will throw the mic back over to me, which is not me, it's Saraf, and then we'll go Game GPT on this one first.
Yeah, you made a good point with multiplayer games having a less important need to storytelling, especially for example, PUBG or the other games similar to that genre, because games in the end, we really need to make games more immersive to players where they will be able to enjoy. And the reason for this saying that multiplayer games have a less need for storytelling is because you make the stories with the people you're playing with. That's one of the things or the reasons why this multiplayer have less focus on storytelling, because the story that you tell are made with the people that you play with. And when you're playing with a single player, such as for example games that is similar to Seraph that we're in, we have a single player single player gameplay. You have the need, or also need to have this to see the importance of storytelling, because you need to also have the players immersed within what you're building, like I've mentioned before. For example, visual aesthetics, for example, is one of the things. You look into into the visual aesthetics of what you're building, but for other people or for projects, they really look into the personality of the game that you're building. They would be able to be attracted to the visuals of your game, but in the end, they want to feel that experience. And when you're playing a single player game, the experience you give to them is via the storytelling. And when you're giving them a multiplayer game, the experience you give to them is the experience that they can build with other players they're doing. But in the end, I think the importance is you should be able to still mix the storytelling and the gameplay, whether it's going to be single player or multiplayer. If you are doing a multiplayer game and you're able to immerse people with a beautiful gaming experience alongside a good storytelling, I think that would be able to get more attention that they would get without a storytelling. That's
I love that take. Yeah, I definitely think, even in those games, like, there's a bad guy and there's a good guy. Like, there's a team one and a team two, and the objective still, in a way, is the story. And honestly, like, a lot of these games as well, they're really taking advantage of a narrative of war, which has always been there, and utilizing that story that's, a tale as old as time, to really set the scene for these games. So I didn't 100% agree with the take. I thought it was the best one I've heard in terms of, like, a polarizing take on the subject. But Game GPT, I'll throw the mic over to you on this one. How important is storytelling in comparison to gameplay?
Yeah, we'd love to get into that. And I actually want to answer your other question too. There was two of them that you posed, Jack. I believe one of them was, what is this? Is there a blurred line between gaming and movies? And then the other one is, does storytelling need to happen in games? I'd love to start with does gaming have a fine line between what is a game and what is a movie? What I'd love to remind everyone is, gaming is probably one of the biggest entertainment industries in the world. So in terms of like revenues in the last like couple of years, you can expect gaming to generate around 200 to 250 billion dollars, whereas film, which is like movies, is a much smaller industry. It's about 10%. of what gaming is. It's around 20 to 25 billion in revenues on an annual basis. Whereas music, which is probably another comparable entertainment industry, is about the same size as film, like 10% of what gaming is, around 20 to 25 billion in annual revenues. So in terms of like how big gaming industry is, it's huge, and it's definitely one of the biggest compared to what everyone consumes in terms of media. As we've seen gaming evolve and gaming grow, as it's on a huge growth trend, as more and more of the world comes online, I feel like that line between gaming and movies is going to keep becoming more blurry. We had some awesome games referenced earlier, which are like Baldur's Gate 3. We had Red Dead Redemption. Number 2 is amazing. I played that all the way through. There's Cyberpunk and a whole bunch of really awesome games. And I feel like on the spectrum of game to movie, they're like a little bit more of a game, but still part of an awesome storyline movie. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, where games are a little bit more movie than there are game, we have some awesome titles like Detroit Become Human. I don't know if you guys have ever played that, but I actually love that game and would encourage everyone to at least try it. If you've never played it before, it's an awesome experience because it isn't really a game at all. It is an interactive movie. There's 3 or 4 different storylines, and you can make choices in the video game to propel the story in a certain direction. And there is no like combat scenes, but you're basically pressing like this is on PS5 or PS4. You basically press X for one decision, or square for another decision, or triangle for another decision, and it just keeps on going on in like a brilliant like 3 or 4 hour storyline, and then everything converges at the end. And the story setting is around effectively androids being given sentience, and how they basically make a future with themselves amongst humans in society. So that is awesome, and I think what we're going to see, kind of like as I was alluding to earlier, is as this industry of gaming becomes larger and larger, and as you can see that it already is so much larger than music and film and a whole bunch of other entertainment industries, there's going to be a spot for everybody. There's going to be gamers that love these type of interactive stories that are more movie than games. And there's going to be people who just play battle royales with their friends, and they go into like battle royale quads every night after they get off work with their buddies from college or work or wherever, and that's what they love to do. I think what's amazing is there's different places for everyone, and that probably segues into your second question, which are like, do games need stories? I personally love games with stories because I think that gives them that kind of emotional connection. I think helps me grow as a person, as everyone else. There's going to be for all the games that I love, there's huge wikis and there's huge fandoms where you can read on every single character and you can read everything about them. And there's content that's made about them on YouTube and all social media about very niche details about them, and maybe different instances that they've had with other characters that people have missed. I think whenever that starts to bud, whenever you see this type of thing happening, you know you're heading in the right direction because you've caught the attention and you've caught the I guess the creative freedom of a lot of people to make content that resonates with others. So that's where I'd go with it. I think there's going to be enough room for everyone, as I say in my closing thoughts here. And I think being an AI company, I think the ability, what we've learned is that games are going to become more and more customizable with AI. And if that means that the story can become customizable so that you can have a game kind of go or an AI engine learn your preferences and build a game story for you, that's exactly what it thinks you would like. I think that would be another thing that we don't even know that can happen, but could be huge when it's here.
I love that take, Devin. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I'm definitely with you on this. I just think fundamentally it gives an extra layer to these games, and like whether it needs it or not, that argument, especially in multiplayer games, is still out there. I do think it always is an addition. Like it always is something that genuinely there will be a huge segment of your gamers who are gonna just really love with it, and they're gonna continue to fall more in love with that game with real story. So yeah, I love the take. Came on, I'm gonna get this a little bit more granular now. I'd love your take on how important storytelling is to what you are building over there.
Well, connect. I mean, at the end of the day, for example, we're building an MMO, so it's a massive multiplayer game, and indeed, I agree on the take. That some of multiplayer games don't really need storytelling. Indeed, a Fortnite or a PUBG or Call of Duty kind of things. If you're playing, that is more like go against another group of people and shooting to each other. So there's not a lot of story that needs to be said there. Even though then, especially for example in our case for an MMO game, instead the storytelling is actually a key aspect of it, because you wanna in an MMO you're actually creating a world for players to immerse themselves, to live a second life, technically speaking, a parallel life of themselves. And so you need to actually tell the player, for example, why the sky is red, or why the trees are that tall, why the grass is that thin, why the people are there, why they created that specific town in that specific region, and so on and so forth. All of those elements are actually giving and enrich the world that the players are going to create their second alter ego, and they're gonna live another life there. And so storytelling is actually a key factor there. You can't have an MMO without storytelling. Also, because most of the content within MMOs, if you look at World of Warcraft, Black Desert, the New World, or whatever, they have quest lines, and every quest lines guide you through a storyline, and it helps you also to understand, for example, the weapon that you just collected, what the weapon is, what's the story of the weapon, why the weapon looks like that. Is all part of the things that makes the entire game, for example, in our perspective, way more rich. There's another thing that I just also wanted to add is definitely gameplay comes first, then storytelling. As I said, I think storytelling is what makes a good game to a great game, because at the end of the day we do remember great games. We all remember, you mentioned Ezio Auditore from Assassin's Creed, or just look at Naughty Dog, the developer of The Last of Us, Uncharted, and stuff like that. They're pretty famous because all of their game have a very strong narrative elements that let become and emphasize and become like part of the entire story. But also, if you look at multiplayer games, there is a kind of a trend that is going on for a couple of years now, which I actually love it. If you go on YouTube and you can search for videos on Minecraft, I don't remember. I think the one of the YouTubers is Skylar or something like that. What the guys does, they do collect people from their own community, and they set up a world, and they tell us, okay, now you have the time to create your own village. They create several factions, and the guys just for 45 minutes go around and tell you how those players playing the game. And those videos are so entertaining, because at the end of the day, you're not just looking at people playing Minecraft, but you're looking at the stories of those villages becoming cities, and then betrayal, people fighting against each other and stuff like that. They just become like it's a 45 minutes movie, short movie built on top of Minecraft from players that are playing a mission and a quest. And this is extremely enticing and extremely entertaining. And this is where you see that with a good gameplay, such as a Minecraft, which in my perspective is one of the most open gameplay out there, storytelling can also be created by the player themselves and not only by the actual developers. And this is even more interesting, because then every single play is a different story that needs to be told. I really encourage everybody to search for those videos on YouTube. Those are amazing and very, very cool to watch. And you can see that, again, the power and how storytelling and gaming are connected
I
together.
do find this really interesting as like a rabbit hole I could very easily dive into. Probably one for another show for how like in depth that can be. But just top of mind, like especially with AI and like the adaptability of some of these games and the storylines, NPCs that don't have just a single dialogue, evolving worlds that aren't gonna react exactly the same way for each gamer. All of these things, like I could see individual gamers having storylines that are really really enticing for a spectator audience as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if that also is like a growing field of view for these spectators. Stuart, I definitely want to keep with the granular takes because we've got a bunch of experts in the room right now, so I'll be remiss not to lean on that expertise.
with Pixelmon, can you give us a little bit of alpha on, how does Pixelmon elevate gaming to an art form through their design and through their storytelling?
Yeah, sure. I don't know that it's necessarily the idea of elevating it as an art form. I think it's really more about leaning into this really rich lore that we've already developed. Each character has personality, has a heritage and origin. We have an entire world, the world of Novathera, already built out. We're actually, I think, struggling a little bit to figure out which slice of Novathera we really want to tell. And we've realized that with all the different regions of it, we could tell various different stories in various different episodic forms of versions of the game or iterations of the game. So to us, we made a couple of different decisions as to what type of game we really wanted to build. And all of that was driven by the notion that we wanted to build out Pixelmon as a franchise, right? It's not so much that we're just a game studio anymore. It's not so much that we're just building games. We do have an entertainment side of things that I don't think that's a secret anymore that is happening. But the focal point is building out this franchise in a way that will have some stickiness, some really inherent lovability among people, and then this aura of mystique where you kind of understand the lore, but you don't know how that's going to play out within each of our games or our animes or even our comic books, etc. So the approach that we're taking really is find a slice of the lore that is cohesive, makes sense as an origin story, makes sense as a season 1 or a version 1. And then build upon that, but also look at the community, listen to the community, see how people are reacting to it. There are some parts of the lore that we've left open that are better filled out by the community, I think, are better filled out by the fans. We always kind of say we're Pokemon meets Game of Thrones. So there is sort of that level of unexpectedness that we're trying to integrate into what we're doing as well.
That is such a wild combo that makes immediately gives a vision to what you were building there. Game of Thrones and Pokemon, my god, if you pull that off, that's going to be one addictive line of storytelling, put it that way. A follow-up for you, Stuart, as well is I'd really love to know a little bit more about the process itself. What is the process of developing a compelling story for a game, and how does that differ from traditional media, especially when you do, as you've mentioned, you are looking to open that up as well. So you're developing the game, you're developing the storyline within the game, but you also know that this is going to be a franchise that's going to be more than a game. So all of those things have to, play into every element of development. You make sure the entertainment side, if there's going to be an anime series side, that also plays back to the game and the storytelling that's happening there plays to the anime series. Really would love to get your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, when we're building these things, it's almost impossible to see the end from the beginning, right? In some cases, there may not be an end, and ideally, there isn't for us, right? We kind of want this to be a very, very long journey, and so given that, the way that we would approach it is that we built this world, we have this lore. The world itself has core principles, core ideas, thoughts, principles, characters. There's facts of the world, and we basically have to keep to that. And everything else can kind of just be spaghetti at the wall, and then see what tendrils out from there, right? I don't know why I used a food reference, but maybe I'm hungry. But really, that's what it is. Just throw things out there, and then sometimes when something tendrils out and it just feels really, really good, our lore is rich and deep enough and the principles are kind of broad enough for us to pull it back and connect it to either one of the characters or a sub story of two different characters. Maybe there's a nuance between, a male or a female character, etc. Right? So there's all these different aspects that can just sort of connect, and it's not necessarily a linear process. But at the end of the day, it's all about the core fundamentals of the the world that we're building. So it's not necessarily telling or building or writing the story from start to finish. It's letting the story branch out on its own based off of these fundamentals.
That is fascinating to hear. I really love that. And look, listeners, if you're enjoying this conversation as well, like likes and retweets of the room, let's show that support. And at this point, if you've liked any of the individual takes on the show, let's get them follows up. Let's follow these guys. They're all building really interesting stuff. Let's keep this going. And I think, look, we are nearing the 40-minute mark of the show, actually just past it. I'd love to get into a little bit of future tech and what we think is going to happen with story and tech, especially with all the advancements that we're seeing right now. So, Game GPT, I'm going to throw this one over to you because you have the most futuristic looking PFP and probably title within the group. What is your take on, with all of the AI updates, with all of these different technology, sectors that impact gaming, from VR to AI to everything in between? How is this going to impact storytelling in the long term? Is there any things that you are specifically paying attention to right now that you think in the long term are going to become more and more part of how games choose to tell a story?
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of, for anyone who may for anyone who may not know what GameGPT is, I can explain it very shortly. And GameGPT, as the name implies, is an AI company. We are an AI model that builds hyper-casual blockchain games. So think Subway Surfer, Temple Run, Fruit Ninja, and many of all of the kind of viral apps that you've ever played before. That's short form content, 10 to 15 minute game loops. That's what our AI model is specialized for. And what I found in kind of being an AI company, you're always looking at technology that's on the fringes, that's constantly coming out. And what I'm really excited for is kind of like the generative video creators. OpenAI and ChatGPT came out with an awesome video creator. If you guys have seen the preview and the trailer for it, I think you guys are going to be blown away. It's called, I believe, Sona or Sora, sorry, is what it's called. So I would encourage all of you guys to just look up Sora AI. They have an amazing and beautiful landing page that looks into a whole bunch of generated video that OpenAI has been able to use to create real video. One of the coolest ones was, I believe it was like an Asian inspired landscape, and I remember it kind of as Japanese because I remember kind of like the pink blossoms kind of falling as a drone is kind of like zooming in on this woman who is walking away from the camera with an umbrella. And it can capture this in so much detail in such a dynamic scene that the first thing that came to me was, wow, this looks great. But like the second thing was like, these are cinematics in video games from now on. Like all of the cutscenes, all of the kind of like introductory cinematics that you get to kind of like get a foothold on the story before you get started with the game. This can very well, I think, bridge that gap and allow anyone to really start putting cinematics in video games. Sora is highly restricted in terms of who can actually access it. It is kind of like, it was teased about 1 or 2 months ago, but I don't think anyone has access to it, maybe a very small amount of people, but we know it's right on the cusp of getting released. I believe there was actually a competitor to OpenAI that launched the video generator before it actually did. I believe it's called like Luma or Lumen. You guys, I'll actually look it up right now just so I have true data that I'm giving you guys. Yeah, it's called Luma Dream Machine, lumalabs.ai. So I encourage everyone to check that one out. I don't have as much experience about it because I went really deep on Sora, but I've heard great things and seen a lot of really awesome tweets about that. One other thing that I think is really awesome that is not necessarily creating cinematics, but it is actually bringing the storytelling within games to a higher level is another AI company called Move.ai, and they actually tweet a lot. So if you want to look up the Move AI Twitter handle, It's just move AI with an underscore at the end. And what these guys actually have allowed people to do is effectively use their own phone and use the app on their iPhone to record a video of a human doing something, and then they can actually take those almost like human movements and rig that up in a 3D environment so that you can plug it right into Unreal Engine or Blender. So if you've ever seen in movies or video games the behind the scenes content where the characters have those really weird looking suits with all of the like dots around each of the joints and around every point of the suit so that they can capture with a real human what's going on inside of the game or the film. You can actually do that on your phone now by just recording a video of you doing something. So being able to do that and to throw that up into Blender, which is like a 3D environment, or into Unreal Engine, which is an awesome game engine that everyone knows, is just mind blowing with where storytelling can go and the resources required to really tell a deep and interesting story like you've never happened before. So that is kind of where I'm going with technological kind of storytelling, and where I think we've just hit the surface. I think more people are going to come out with more ways to really tackle what people do to create video, but also to curate these type of storytelling effects inside of video games and maybe beyond video games. So that's where I'd go with it. Yeah, and maybe that's good enough, Jack. I could go on and on, but I think that's probably a good stopping point.
I love that I threw the mic to you on that one, because that was like, my hand actually hurts now from all those different tools that I'm going to look into. But yeah, I love how that's opened up the discussion. Me, like, what about what you're building over at Seraph? Like, is that something you've looked into? Like, any technology that's going to support the storytelling? Is storytelling important to what you are building? Would really love to, hear your take, and like what sort of technologies, what sort of innovation you're at least paying attention to that you think may end up supporting your gameplay and your storytelling in the future.
Yeah, so thank you. Everybody have brought a lot of good things or mentioned a lot of things that we really see eye to eye here in Surf. For example, Stuart have mentioned that most companies have shifted from being a game company and being turned into entertainment. And Game GPT also mentioned the AI for storytelling. We also look into it, not really because we use it as a bandwagon or for us, using hot words, but we see game writing. It can be very technical, and it can be extremely collaborative or iterative. So it allows you to give you a basic outlook on what you wanted to do, and then once you have that, you then are being able to have something to play around with. For example, we have artists, right? That then they're going to be using, for example, a chat GPT or whatever kind of AI it is. It's going to be giving you a outlook or a basic outlook of what you requested, and then these artists will then pass it around, put other inspiration on top of it, and then out of nowhere you just get something unique out of that process. And then you're going to be able to include that to the bigger picture. I believe Kamon have mentioned before, storytelling is not really just about the whole progress of what you're building. It can also be something of small stories that is not only throughout all the game, but also, for example, the environment. I believe somebody mentioned players would be thinking, why is the sky red? So storytelling is really small stories connected all together to be able to have this bigger picture. And through AI, with the game writers, they would be able to even use this, for example, when writing a biography of the character that you're building. For example, here in Seraph, we have the melee, we have the range, we have the sorcerers, we have the necromancers, we have the druids. With AI, it's going to be able to not only sit to make things faster or produce things faster, it's also going to be able to give you a skeleton for what you're building. For example, we've been seeing games use asset stores, and then within the asset stores, they're going to be using those assets as an inspiration for what they're going to be building. And I believe with AI, it's just one similar thing that we're trying to do also here in Seraph. It's not only going to be able to make you have this kind of guidance on the storytelling that you want to make, but also going to be a guidance for the creators or for the artists that you have who are actually doing the storytelling to make it more of a game that you will be having an emotional connection with. So in the end, even if we get this progressions with the technologies that we have, with the AIs, with the cinematic trailers, with the graphics and so forth, in the end it will still go back to the creators that are, or the idea guys that are doing the game or producing the game, for them to have this kind of technology be turned into something that would end up. Oh yeah. Yes, Jack.
Oh no, sorry, you keep going. I was just agreeing.
Oh yeah. I thought you mentioned something. Yeah, in the end, even with all these technologies, it will still end up with people who are actually trying to mix things up to have this emotional connection of players to the Pokemon. So that's the gist. A lot of these technologies are being produced from one day to another, but in the end, I believe that the emotional connection is still, like GameGPT mentioned. GameGPT themselves is an AI company, and they still see the importance of emotional connection. We also see some similarity to that as well.
Yeah, like for me, honestly, like I really love that take, by the way, and I definitely like resonate heavily as a gamer as well. It's not something I want to see go anywhere. If anything, I do believe AI will open up that world because of the friction that it removes from the actual output from the team. And I think if that's something you're seeing your community members add to, yeah, I'm really interested in that line of thought, especially when we then think about NFTs and Web3 and blockchain technology, but also when we think of just digital ownership as well, like really owning those characters that we're developing. If you want real ownership, I think with that ownership, for people to really resonate with it, they have to have a deep-seated connection with it. And I don't believe that's possible without story. Like, Call of Duty, like I'm all for it. I know people will pay, it's CSGO, I think, have just had $1 million sale on one of their weapon skins. So you do have that element. But if we're talking characters, if we're talking, Stuart, you mentioned Pokemon with Game of Thrones. If we're talking like a Charizard, I don't believe a Charizard would be valuable without the Pokemon IP and the lore and the story that's been developed around that. And the fact that because of that story, as gamers developed and aged, the anime also grew with it, and it brought in new people, but also just kept it into the mind's eye of everybody, and it just kept it like really at the forefront of its own genre. It's like one of the most powerful IPs on the planet right now, and there's no surprise to me that the assets that they hold are also some of the most valuable. So Stuart, to that front, like we're very close to the end of the show. I'd love just a final take from you in terms of, do you agree that, with, or, like any take around IP lore building and its importance to digital assets and ownership and people valuing that ownership? And also, if there's anything from Pixelmon's side, any updates, any milestones that are coming up soon that you'd like the listeners to know before the end of the show, I'd love to hear that too.
Sorry. Final take, digital ownership, storytelling. I mean, it's kind of what you're saying, right? Charizard being valuable without all of that lore behind it. I think in and of itself, intrinsically, Charizard could be a cool character, right? People might be like, oh, I look at it, I like it, I think it's cool. That's about as far as it goes in terms of resonating with me right now. But yeah, it could be a cool display for the office or for the desk, etc. Definitely, I think in order for us to deepen people's association with this concept of value behind the IP and behind these characters, etc., we're looking at it from that point of view, right? I think a part of it is that it makes sense. Now, the other part of it is like we kind of have to. We have an NFT collection that has holders that kind of want to know what the value of the actual NFTs are going to be. So we're not rushing into things. I think, as Julio is always saying in our Discord, we're trying to do things proper. We're trying to do it in a balanced way between the speed of Web 2 versus Web 3. But really, it's all about quality and quality of storytelling. So for the coming advent of Web3 gaming and IP franchise building within the Pixelmon world, intrinsic value is what we want to raise, right? So intrinsic value without a story, I already said, goes as far as the display on the desk. Intrinsic value with something that has a story behind it is something that expands, permeates through cultures. It gets people to like either love or hate it, which is a perfectly acceptable response. But at the same time, any kind of reaction, any kind of sentiment is going to raise the value of each one of these characters and ultimately the world that we're building. And so that's why we're leaning into franchise first storytelling that has derivatives, basically games, animes, comic books, potentially in the future licensing, plushies, etc. It's all part of the same process. I think ultimately one day the ultimate form of flattery would be if people out there start making their own versions of something with Pixelmon, stuff that's not necessarily driven by us. So kind of segueing into that, we have somebody already making a game, leaning into what we have been building as a publishing arm with Play Ember. We are about to release a game called Monster Tycoon with them. I think it's going to hit any time now, week or two. And secondly, Eternal League, although the lore has not been really, really published or publicized, for the people on this call, it is actually a derivative IP of the Pixelmon world. It's just in a different timeline. It's with different characters. So one day this will come out and you'll be like, I kind of knew that. So thanks for tuning in. And then thirdly, we've got some other developments that are going to be built on the Pixelmon IP. There's lots and lots of stuff coming this way. Our publishing, the publishing aspect of our business is starting to grow. And so keep your eye out for that. I'd say the last thing from our perspective, the only thing that's been on my mind at this point has been Gamescom, which we are going to next week. I'm literally flying next Monday. We're going to be there. 12 people from the Pixelmon team are going to be there. We're going to have showcases of our games. So you're going to be able to see sort of a preview and actually play and tinker with them. So if you're in Cologne, Germany during that time, highly encourage you guys to come by and check things out. But if not, we're going to have some streams of content. We're going to have a few kind of live off the floor pieces that we'll be sharing across Twitter, across Discord, and then obviously an end of the event recap. So that is coming. And if you missed that and you're in Asia, we'll also be at Token 2049 in Singapore, obviously, since we're a Singaporean company. And I think I'm going to leave it there.
Honestly, I don't mean to seem like a stalker, but I will both be at Gamescom and Token 2049, Stuart. So, hopefully we'll be able to go see this game, and definitely would love to do some content around that as well. So really, really excited to see this thing. And yeah, really, really enjoyed today's show. I have so many questions. I think I'm definitely going to have to figure out if we can do a follow-up to this where we dive more into, the NFT side and what the lore and story means for that. But like really, really enjoyed the show, and just want to give a huge shout out to me, as in Seraph, not me, but me, Seraph, to Game GPT, to Seraph themselves, to Kamon, to Stuart, and to Pixelmon. Like, you guys have crushed this one. I've learned so much, and I'm just so excited. I genuinely am so excited to see what you guys are building, but also just to see the future of what this whole space becomes. And thank you to all the listeners who've tuned in. And we are dead on the hour mark, so we're just going to have to run this one out and end the show. But thank you all so much. Really, really appreciate all the support. You guys are why we do this. And that's it from me. See you in the next one.
Thanks for joining, guys. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you, everyone.